Hey gang, it's time for another big deck tech, and if you are liking these decks that we're brewing for you, go ahead and hit subscribe down below. If you're loving it, go check out our Patreon at patreon.com/commandersbrew and consider donating. And we got lots of other stuff around the channel, so click around. Anyways, let's get to this week's deck.
Ooh, yes. Are you tired of getting all your creatures wrathed all the time? I certainly am. So I put together a deck that is wrath-proof. It is a deck that wants wraths. I dare you to wrath me, bro. That's the tentative title that I'm going with. Yeah. So the whole point of this deck is to load it up with a bunch of threats, and specifically threats that if they get wrathed, they continue to be threats, or they do awful things to the person that wrathed us. And it turns out the best colors for this, in my opinion, are the Jund colors. And there's a commander that plays right into this strategy. That is Kresh the Bloodbraided. 2 black, red, green. Legendary Human Warrior starts as a 3/3. Whenever another creature dies, you may put X +1/+1 counters on Kresh the Bloodbraided, where X is that creature's power. Kresh, if he can survive a wrath, becomes so massive that it will surely be a one-hit kill on anyone who can't block him or doesn't have enough to block him if we give him trample.
Wow. This Kresh has to be in the running for the commander we've brewed around the most at this point, I'd say.
Maybe.
We've done it. I think this might be the third one. We recently did another Z-Drew. I think Z-Drew has 3 as well.
Yeah.
Anyways, not to derail what's going on. I just thought of that. I was like, oh, actually, this is like the third Kresh deck we've built. Cool. But neat abilities make for neat moves. So that's the reason that happens.
I mean, that's what these deck techs are all about. Like, I've talked to the general strategy of it. So why don't we get right down to it, to some specific and neat moves.
Working on a
neat
moves.
All right. Well, I mean, if this is what we're doing, I mean, let's get to the first neat move of this deck.
The first neat move is, as I said, so this is a way that we could possibly win the game, like, in short order. If we get to resolve a Bearer of the Heavens, that's 7 and a red for a giant, it's 10/10, and when Bearer of the Heavens dies, destroy all permanents at the beginning of the next end step. That's a brutal ability. Generally speaking, people will not want to wrath while Bearer of the Heavens is out, because that means everything on the entire board is destroyed.
Yeah.
So you might get into a position where your opponent's like, well, I have to wrath, otherwise you're going to win. So, I mean, sorry, table, I guess I have to. And that's when we will resolve a heroic intervention. 1 and a green for an instant. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So after Bearer of the Heavens dies, and that, oh, but I guess this won't perfect from a wrath. I just realized, because Bearer of the Heavens itself won't die then. Huh.
I mean, you could do it after.
But
because it's on the next end step that the stuff gets destroyed, right?
But if the wrath destroyed Bearer of the Heavens, I can't cast heroic intervention in response to the wrath, otherwise everything died. I out-neat moved myself with this one.
It looks like you did.
So the way you would do this then is with a sack outlet, of which there are numerous. You would sack Bearer of the Heavens, and then in response to the ability, you'd cast heroic intervention so that all your stuff sticks around and no one else's stuff sticks around.
I mean, heroic intervention is just a cool, neat move to do in the face of a wrath anyways, right?
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Not necessarily needing Bear of the Heavens around to make that good.
Right.
But I guess the next guy here is a part of this kind of combination, right? Deathbringer Thoktar for black, red. For the zombie beast, it's a 3/3. Whenever another creature dies, you may put a 1/1 counter on Deathbringer Thoktar and then remove a counter from Deathbringer Thoktar. Deathbringer Thoktar deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So with this guy, you don't even need to worry about combat. You can a lot of times just remove a bunch of counters and deal the final bit of damage to people. I remember this card being such a pain playing against that Precon, the Prosh deck.
Yeah.
Like, it would just, like, the sack outlet combo with Deathbringer Thoktar being able to do direct damage. Like, it was just a pain in the butt.
Yeah, huge pain in the butt. And if we can make Deathbringer Thoktar survive a Wrath, it will get out of there with tons of tokens, tons of counters on there, and just be able to finish off a player.
Yeah, it's a like 6 mana for the 3/3. You might think is like understated, but it very quickly gets bigger than that. And I think this ability is a really strong one in decks that are looking to sack things and looking to have things die. So definitely protecting this guy from a Wrath is going to be a huge deal. A very neat move.
Yeah, neat move. So neat move to give our creatures indestructibility and all the stuff that can go with it.
All right. So the next neat move involves using a little card from Amacat, Gate to the Afterlife. 3 mana for an artifact that says whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you gain 1 life. Then you may draw a card, and if you do, discard a card. So you get to loot and gain a life for whenever a non-token creature you control dies. And then you can pay 2 and tap this card. Sacrifice Gate to the Afterlife, search your graveyard, hand and or library for a card named Godpharaoh's Gift and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it, activate this ability only if there are 6 or more creature cards in your graveyard. This is just like standalone. Obviously, we're thinking you probably have Godpharaoh's Gift in the deck as well.
Yes, I do.
Obviously, otherwise this card is not as scary. But honestly, though, just for the ability to gain life and loot, that's pretty good. Especially if you're looking to fill up graveyards for this purpose or any other purpose, right? So
it's not unplayable without Godpharaoh's Gift.
No, like if your Godpharaoh's Gift got exiled, this card is still pretty good.
Yeah. And then the thing that this is a neat move specifically with is the dredge mechanic. And specifically, I'm talking Golgari Thug. Golgari Thug is 1 black for a human 1/1.
1 and a black.
Warrior.
Not 1 black. Oh, you said
1 and a black.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. 2 CMC. When Golgari Thug dies, put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So there you go. So if you, just generally speaking, if you Wrath with Golgari Thug on the board, it will go to the graveyard and something awful that you dealt with before is coming back next turn. So watch out. And it has Dredge 4, which means anytime I draw a card, instead of drawing that card, I can mill myself for 4 and put Golgari Thug back in my hand. So Gate to the Afterlife says, whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you can gain 1 life. Then you may Dredge 4 and put Golgari Thug back in your hand. If you do, discard a card. I can discard Golgari Thug and keep that Dredge combo going anytime a non-token creature I control dies.
Yeah, this triggers off of loot because it's drawing a card. So, like, this is a very quick way for you to fill up your graveyard, that's for sure.
And so we will get to 6 creature cards in our graveyard, toot sweet, which will allow us to cast Godpharaoh's Gift, which is normally a 7-mana artifact, and says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. It gains haste until end of turn. So most of our creatures have some exit of the battlefield abilities, or abilities that care about when creatures die. So they'll be watching for death. It just strengthens our strategy by having this out. And we've got some creatures that cost an awful lot of mana. So to be able to just pop one out for free to enable some combos is pretty amazing.
I also love that this is a May. Like, you're not forced to exile a card from your graveyard to make it, because sometimes you'll want to have like specific ones in your graveyard, like dredge cards, for example, and you don't have to exile those if you don't want. I mean, it's a small thing, but it's nice.
Yeah.
I love that also, and even though I read it, I didn't even realize it, but Gate to the Afterlife for the 2 and tap and sacking it and looking for the Godpharaoh's Gift, it puts it right onto the battlefield. So yeah, that's a huge advantage mana-wise. You're going from 7 mana down to 2, which is sweet.
Yeah, and then I might be able to get a copy of a 7-drop, so it's kind of like I'm getting like 12 mana for free.
yeah, it's amazing. That's really good. Yeah, very neat move.
Okay, so let's talk about another neat move. This is we could spend a long time on these neat moves, but I'm only going to highlight a couple. But Protean Hulk, thank you for unbanning it. 5 green for a beast that is 6/6, and when Protean Hulk dies, search your library for any number of creature cards with total converted mana cost 6 or less, and put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So this is incredible. If we're talking Wraths, we get to say, what kind of board do I want to come back from with this Wrath?
Yeah.
If you try to Wrath me, I get to say, like, well, what do I want to have happen? Well, let's say I have a sack outlet on board, and you put a Wrath on the stack. Okay, I'm going to sack my Protean Hulk, and I get to get 6 CMC. So 4 of that CMC will be Poison Tip Archer, 2 black-green, Reach, 2/3, Death Touch. Whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. And I have 2 left. I'm going to grab Zulaport Cutthroat, 1 and a black. Whenever Zulaport Cutthroat or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life.
Yeah.
So for every creature on the battlefield, our opponents are losing 1 life now.
2 life.
And if it's ours, they're losing 2 life.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
I thought about, like, and then so the other option is, like, we could go Blood Artist instead if our opponents have more creatures than us.
And then that's only a target, though.
Yeah, but we'll target whoever started the Wrath to just make them pay.
To just make them pay. When he said that is like...
Yeah.
So they will feel the pain.
You will pay for your transgressions.
Yeah, the Zulaport's obviously better when you have the bigger board, as opposed to those other ones, which you can punish one specific player. But Poison Tip Archer is great because it's everyone. It's all the creatures, and it hits all the opponents. So like it doesn't have the life gain, but like that's fine. That's totally fine. So you can do some quick math, and like sometimes just this, depending on what's on the board, just be able to totally take out a player.
Oh yeah.
And they'll just
very reasonably.
And they'll think that, like, okay, well, I'm going to Wrath the board, and he's going to get something from his Protean Hulk. But like, okay, the move to sack something first, to sack the Protean Hulk first, is going to, like, I think catch a lot of people by surprise in the face of a Wrath, because usually they're thinking like, oh, I wouldn't want a Wrath because Protean Hulk is out there, because you're just going to get 2 things after it. But the fact that you're doing it ahead of time is like, that's got to be worrisome if that ever happens.
Yeah.
Another 2 creatures that you can go grab with your Protean Hulk combo, which, these are good combos, but these aren't like, we're not like playing CEDH here and like, bringing out some crazy combo that just immediately wins us the game. So like Protean Hulk can be a casual card. That's what I guess that's kind of what we're saying here. A cool 2 creature combination. First we got Yahenni, Undying Partisan, 2 and a black. For the legendary Aetherborn Vampire, the 2/2 with haste. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on Yahenni, and then you can sacrifice another creature, and Yahenni gains indestructible. So you can get him in here. He's going to be able to grow because of all the other creatures that are dying from this Wrath, and also, obviously, if you have another creature, which you will, Yahenni will gain indestructible, and that one of that other creatures is Grim Haruspex. 2 and a black. For the 3/2, it has morph, but whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you draw a card. So you're just drawing cards. You've got a massive Yahenni. It's indestructible. You're just set up for the next turn. And this was on someone else's turn that you did this, remember. They wrathed, and now you get to start your turn with a big Yahenni, and, probably Grim Haruspex is still out there. You probably had more creatures than just the Protean Hulk. But even if you didn't, Yahenni's still indestructible and big, and you got to draw some cards. So, anyways, really cool, very neat move. You're ready to go after this Wrath.
Yeah. Here's a very simple one. If your opponents, if you have a sack outlet and maybe like you don't have your Poison Tip Archer, here's another way to go. I'm just going to sack Protean Hulk and turn it into a Rage Thrower. 5 and a red for a human shaman. It's 4/2. Whenever another creature dies, Rage Thrower deals 2 damage to target player. And the way the rules work, if everything dies all at once, including Rage Thrower sees it all happen, and those triggers will still go onto the stack. So you can just count up and be like, how many creatures on the board? 15? Okay, that's 30 damage in groups of 2, so I can kill you and mostly you. Great, let's do it.
Yikes. And yet another one to grab is Hangerback Walker. Entering the battle, Hangerback Walker is the XX that enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. It's a 0/0 otherwise. When it dies, you put 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield for each +1/+1 counter on Hangerback Walker. And you can pay 1 and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on it.
Yeah. So
right?
I want to just illustrate that whenever you're sacking Protean Hulk, this is a 0 CMC spell, so you can always grab this one and it will die immediately. But since we often will care about creatures dying, then that's good. We're going to do this in addition.
Yeah.
And Hangerback Walker, just to spend a moment on it, it's a very good card also if you aren't doing shenanigans with it. If I cast it, as a 3 with 3 counters, I'm adding counters to it. It's another reason our opponents don't want to Wrath, because if you kill Hangerback Walker, I'm going to get a lot of Thopters when it dies.
Having this guy, having creatures in the graveyard is also always really good. Yeah, add this to all of the previous neat moves we've talked about. And
Yeah. This is just like your free Black Friday bonus deal, Protean Hulk shopping spree.
You can load, there's a couple other good examples of this that you can grab as well, I'm sure. So
oh yeah, this is my favorite because of its utility in the overall strategy.
Yeah, Hangerback Walker, solid. Add it in. Yeah, free bonus content. Cyber Monday.
Some of these cards are expensive. We've definitely highlighted some expensive cards, and it takes a lot of mana to get them. That's why we have a card called Pitiless Plunderer in the deck. 3 and a black for a human pirate, 1/4. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a colorless treasure artifact creature token. No, not creature token. Treasure. It's an artifact treasure token. Too many adjectives. We know what treasure does. It's a little artifact that says tap, sack, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. That's a great way to turn Wraths or even just our sack kind of loops into more mana to further more cards and more things. All those cards we drew with Grim Haruspex, we'll be able to cast some of them right away with this.
Yeah, Pitiless Plunderer. I was going to say this next one, I was like, well, if you got this card, then you might as well include Revel in Riches. 4 and a black, the enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a treasure artifact token, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. We've talked about this card a bunch on the show before, in that it's possible that this card is just good enough to run in just about any black deck that's, especially control decks where you're killing a lot of stuff. Certainly in this deck, it's great, especially if you're running stuff like Pitiless Plunderer as well. Not only for the win the game thing, because I think that's mostly just going to be a bonus, but this is just going to generate you a ton of mana. You're going to be able to cast all your stuff. It fixes mana. It's just really good. Really, really good. Creatures die. Creatures die.
Revel in Riches, again, a strong message that says don't wrath the board right now, opponents. Because if you do, you're just going to give me 10 straight treasures, and I will win on my upkeep unless you can do something else.
Yeah, that really does prevent the wrath, right? If there are actually 10 other creatures out there, and they're just going to give you them, they truly can't.
They truly can't.
And you can. So that's the upside, right? You can. And then they have to deal with that. So you're still able to take care of the board if you need to.
Yeah.
That's great. What else we have here?
Oh, this might be the single most don't wrath the board card ever made. Do you want to read this one?
Yes. Oh, wow. Yes. Oh, I know this card. We've also talked about this one before. It's Vicious Shadow, 6 and a red for the enchantment. I'm always amazed that this card even exists. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, you may have Vicious Shadows deal damage to target player equal to the number of cards in that player's hand.
Right. In Commander, we often have lots of cards in hand.
Yeah.
There is a rare deck, probably red or white, that kind of dumps its hand and maybe wants to draw a bunch. I don't know. Maybe that exists. But the beauty is, Vicious Shadows doesn't tie the creature dying to the player that owned it. If somehow a player has 1 card in hand, but most of the creatures, well, that's fine. I'll just send all that damage to the player with all the cards in hand. It's so weird.
Yeah, isn't it? Target player equal to the number of players. Yeah, so if the guy who had everything die has 7 cards in his hand, you can kill the person who only has 1 card in their hand that way, right? That's how you can do that? You may have his shadows deal damage to target player
equal to the number of cards in that
that
player's hand. But
so
it
it's going to
doesn't
deal
mean
damage differently. Yeah, differently to each person, kind of, right?
Yeah, so it deals damage differently, but the thing that I feel they would have changed if they made this card more recently is it's if a creature dies, that player takes damage equal to the number of cards in their hand. It would tie the creature's ownership to the person who you have to target. But here it's just like, no, man, they're all at you. Like, I'm going to pick on one person with this.
Oh, man, yeah, this can get really out of hand. I mean, blue players are just going to... They're just going to die to this card, usually.
Like, if you've got 5 cards in hand, 6 creatures need to die, and that's it. You're dead.
You're dead. I just have to read it again because I'm like, wait, what? Like, this is every time I see this card, that's what I do. I go, what? No way. So, other creatures can die. You don't even need to have creatures on the board for you to die from this because you have 8 cards in your hand or whatever. Like,
yeah,
that's unreal.
Yeah, if there's a control player with no board but 10 cards in hand somehow, you're like, well, if 3 creatures die, I'm going to send 30 to that guy.
Yeah, that's rough.
When you sack a creature, that happens.
That's right. Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, there's no wonder this is a 7-mana enchantment. Like, it's a big one. It's right up there, but it's very powerful.
I'm using treasures on this one big time.
Absolutely. Yeah, there you go. I mean, Vicious Shadow is always a neat move.
Always
if you can ever get it out there, it's definitely worth making happen.
Yeah.
Underrated card. Don't see it too often, though.
I did have a few surprises and discoveries, though. I mean, that'll cover the main neat moves. But in the surprises and discoveries category, while I was looking for cards that, like, whenever creatures die and all that kind of stuff, I found Shriveling Rot. 2 black for an instant, and it has Entwine for 2 and a black, so I can pay 2 black for one of 2 abilities, or I can pay 4 black, add the Entwine, and get both of these effects. Choose one. Until end of turn, whenever a creature is dealt damage, destroy it, or, and this is the interesting one, until end of turn, whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, that creature's controller loses life equal to its toughness. So I probably wouldn't want to do this because my board is built to be very strong, and as creatures die, my board gets even stronger. So if I were to cast this, I might kill myself on a Wrath if I cast this in response to a Wrath. But I bring it up here if you have sort of a more controlling black deck, consider running this, because if someone Wraths and you end up slipping in this instant, you could end up killing a person with a lot of stuff on the board. Or if you have a way to sack your stuff before you resolve the Shriveling Rot, but other players don't, you can kill them that way too.
Interesting. The art on this is really crazy. This has got to be a Phyrexian card, right? Oh no, it's from.
Oh, no doubt, it's from Darksteel. Yeah, that was yeah. The Phyrexians went to Mirrodin.
Yeah, right. Yeah, interesting. Okay. There's also another one here that you've noted, which is Thrilling Encore.
Yeah.
4 and a black for an instant. It's from Battle Bond and says put onto the battlefield under your control all creature cards in all graveyards that were put there from the battlefield this turn. Again, another kind of like Revel in Riches. It's kind of another card that's could be run in a lot of decks just because of how often you see board Wraths. This just gets you all the creatures. Like you said, if you're in a controlling deck where you're leaving up a lot of mana and you're doing a lot of stuff on people's end steps and things like that, Thrilling Encore can be just an absolute monster of a card. Just getting the entire battlefield back on your side.
Pretty good.
That
is a thrilling encore if there ever was one.
It certainly is thrilling. Welcome to the winning team. Yeah, you made the winning team this way. But definitely good in this deck. Definitely good in a lot of these decks that are going to be sacrificing lots of creatures, especially the non-token versions. Even if you're doing it for that, so you sack your board for a bunch of effects or whatever, and then you have a lot of those ETB effects, then cast Thrilling Encore at the end of your turn, get them all back again, bunch of triggers, that alone is worth it. And then I think the version where you do this in response to a Wrath is even better. Or not response to a Wrath, but you do it on the end step after a Wrath kind of thing.
Yeah, agreed.
And you included this because we're talking about Battle Bond cards. They came and went. We loved the set. We raved about it. We loved a lot of the cards that were reprinted. We loved a lot of the cards that were created for the set, like this one, and then it kind of like goes away, and I haven't really seen many of the Battle Bond cards being played. I've seen like an occasional like toothy pop up here and there, but like, and I'm sure there's more included in people's decks. You just don't obviously see all the cards, but just getting a little more love for Battle Bond out there. Like,
yeah,
it was a pretty fun set to play, sealed and stuff like that, and it was definitely a fun commander set. A lot of good cards in there.
Yeah,
cool. Maybe they'll do some reprints of those types of cards in like future commander product.
I hope so.
That would be the good place to do it. What about budget report? It's time for the budget report.
This is where we take all of the cards and you try to destroy them, but they don't.
They don't destroy. They say no.
They say no. So this deck,
one of these literally does say no, basically.
yeah. This deck came in at $120, $121.80. But half the value is in 7 of the cards. 7 of the cards make $60. In fact, the top 3 most expensive cards, which we're going to name, are over $35. If you were to go to the store and buy them, 32, I think. So already we're under $100 if you want to cut these. I think they're all, well, 2 of them are cuttable. Let's start off. Most expensive card is Wormcoil Engine. 6 mana, Worm, 6/6, Death Touch, and Lifelink. And when it dies, you get a 3/3 Worm with Death Touch and a 3/3 Worm with Lifelink. A worm.
First appearance of Wormcoil Engine on Commander's Brew, I'd say.
Yes, I think so. I mean, this is a $20 card. So this is out of our budget the old way, and it is pushing this budget over $100. I think this card is an excellent wrath-proof creature because obviously if it gets killed, you get the same power and toughness and the same effects over 2 bodies. It is phenomenal. It is $20 for good reason. Reprint this every set, please, if you can.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
But like, obviously, it's certainly cuttable. We have so many great creatures that are fine against wraths. Like, if you want to save $20, easy cut.
This card, though, I mean, because we've never really spoken about it before, this is where this card shines, right? Like in these types of decks, sacrificing decks where you're wrathing a lot. That's the whole point of it. Great when you're talking about creating more tokens and things like that. Wormcoil Engine is $20 for a reason. I would say, like, if you have one, it's so like great, and if you don't, like, it is one of those rare cards where I think it is probably worth grabbing one, like when they reprint, if you can, or like, maybe before it even goes up even more, because it can go in so many decks and it's so fun to have and can win you games, get you back into games because of the lifelink and all that. Like, yeah, it's awesome. I bought the red precon when it came out, the mono red precon, the Dreddy one, just because of this card. This card was in it. And I was like, well, I get a Wormcoil Engine, so I'm definitely getting it. And then it turns out that whole deck is great.
Yeah, good.
The next one, speaking of Commander Precons, is Marin of Clan Nel Toth. 2 black, green for the legendary Human Shaman, 3/4. Whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. And at the beginning of your end step, you choose target creature in a graveyard. If the card's CMC is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return to the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your hand. So, I mean, there's a reason this is one of the most popular commanders to build around. Or to buy, I suppose, because the value you get from Marin is unbelievable. As a commander, obviously, she is one of the best graveyard-based commanders out there. In the 99, still really good. She's going to get stuff back to your hand every turn, no matter what. And if you can build up a few experience counters, well, I mean, that's just gravy. That's just amazing. So
yeah,
but expensive coming in at around $11. Because she's such a popular commander.
Yeah, and I think cuttable, like, as a commander, as you said, Marin is incredible. In the 99, very good, but not nearly as powerful as she is as a commander. So certainly cuttable for $11.
I would agree. I think if you want Marin to be your commander, she's well worth $11. But if she's in your 99, you might be able to replace that effect with something else. Palace Siege comes to mind.
Now here's one. The next most expensive card. It's $9 or $10, and this is one that I wouldn't cut from the deck. It's Birthing Pod, 3 and a Phyrexian green. So you can pay 3 and 2 life, or 3 and a green. And then it has an ability. It's an artifact. It has an ability 1 and a Phyrexian green, so either 1 and 2 life or 1 and a green. You have to do this as a sorcery on your turn, but you get to sacrifice a creature, search your library for a creature with CMC 1 more than the creature that you sacked, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. So you get to sack amazing creatures. You get to pump Kresh up by a ton of plus encounters. Maybe Vicious Shadows goes off. Maybe you get a Revel in Riches treasure. A bunch of other stuff happens. And you get to get another crazy creature among it. This card does so much good things in this deck. It is worth the $10 easy.
Easy. This is banned in Modern for a reason.
Yep.
You know, this card's amazing. Even if you're not even specifically building your curve around the Birthing Pod and making sure you have, you know, something at every CMC, this card is still amazing. You sack, you know, your low level, you know, utility creatures for when they kind of run out, or just for value, and then just get something better. Like it's just so good. This is what creates toolbox decks
Yeah.
Toolbox decks out of Carador decks and Marin decks and things like that. Like Birthing Pod just does so much work. It's so good. And let's not forget the Phyrexian mana, just making it so that you can do this for 1, you know, cast it for 3 and 2 life, and then get that activation right away. Like you can do this on turn 4.
Yeah.
It's really, really good.
I mean, yeah, and if I've got a gate to the afterlife, I'm getting one of that life back that I will have paid to use this anyway.
That's true. Yeah, it's true. The one thing I see a lot of newer players who play with this card forget about is that sorcery speed clause. You cannot do this at instant speed.
Right.
Just remember that. But yeah, I mean, these are amazing cards. I think if it was me, if I was looking to save money, I'm cutting Marin and I'm leaving in Wormcoil and Birthing Pod.
Okay.
But you're right, though. There's a lot of replaceable effects like Wormcoil. There are stuff that do similar things to Wormcoil, so even that is, arguably.
Yeah, like Wormcoil isn't flashy. It's just the best at what it does.
Exactly, yeah. Like Armada Worm is something that's kind of even similar. It's like this big worm that like brings in another token. Like that alone is kind of similar. And if we're talking about similar effects on dying triggers, well, my favorite card of the deck is one that does a decent little impression of it's like a little Wormcoil engine.
Yeah.
And that is Mitotic Slime. Mitotic Slime is 4 and a green for a 4/4, and it's an ooze. And when Mitotic Slime dies, you create 2 2/2 green ooze creature tokens with, when this creature dies, create 2 1/1 green ooze creature tokens. So it just keeps splitting and splitting until you get so you'll always have, well, not always, but for 3 deaths of this thing, you'll have 4 power toughness on the battlefield from it.
Yeah.
Whether it's 1, 2, or 4 creatures doing it. I love this guy. This reminds me of learning to play Magic, Sean, because you taught me how to play Magic. And this card was in your cube at the time, which is like where the cards came from that were teaching me how to play mostly. And Mitotic Slime was one that stood out to me always as this is so cool. It's so, it's difficult to get rid of. I remember specifically this card and Doomblade. Oh, and Pacifism.
Yeah.
I remember thinking both Doomblade and Pacifism, just being wait, it only costs 2 and this thing doesn't do anything anymore? It's dead? Or it can't even attack or block or whatever? Anyways, that was a real thing Magic had to deal with for a while. But Mitotic Slime always stood out as being super fun. And in Commander, I think it sticks around as being an amazing card for sack outlet decks. It's got, like we said, Wrath Protection. And I like it specifically, too, in decks that like to populate and copy tokens and stuff like that. I think it's really fun.
It's 7 sack triggers.
Yeah. Zulaport Cutthroat loves this card.
Yeah, right? I'll sack Mitotic Slime, then I'll sack the 2 2/2s, then I'll sack the 4 1/1s. Thank you.
That's incredible. That's so good. And then if you can reanimate this, or if you anything like that, it's just too much.
Get out of here.
Get out of here. What about you? What's your favorite card in the deck?
My favorite card in the deck is Mimic Vat. 3 generic for an artifact, and as imprint, whenever a non-token creature dies, you basically put it under the vat, and I can pay 3, tap it, and get a token copy of whatever's under the vat, and it has haste, and it exiles at the beginning of the next end step. And if I put a new creature under the vat, the old creature goes back to the graveyard that it was originally headed from. Yeah, there's so many creatures on my side of the board that I want under the Mimic Vat.
Yeah.
Mitotic Slime as one mere example, right? Yeah. Like, I would love to make a new Mitotic Slime that disappears and then it gets exiled, so it won't create tokens, but I have plenty of psych outlets, so it will create tokens in that sense.
Wormcoil Engine, of course, as well. Another great
Wormcoil Engine. You name it. Anything we've talked about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's great.
There's so many good ones. I mean, Protean Hulk with the sack out.
Protean Hulk.
Forget it.
So good.
Too good. That's good. Nonsense. Yeah. So Mimic Vat, it's very easy to see why this card immediately gets killed every time I've ever played it.
Yeah.
Like, this is a lightning rod for artifact removal, which can be great when you're playing it, next to next to a card like Birthing Pod, right? So between this and Birthing Pod, like your opponents have a tough decision if they have a naturalized effect in their hand. Like, which one do they take out?
I don't know.
They're honestly both so good. I mean, I guess you got to take out Birthing Pod, right?
Yes.
I think you have to hit Pod over Mimic Vat, but that leaves them with a Mimic Vat, which is so good.
I mean, I think it depends. I mean, because I would look at, I don't know, man. Because like Birthing Pod, they're just going to keep getting more and more effects. But Mimic Vat, they're going to keep getting the same effect. Like if there's a Protean Hulk under Mimic Vat, you got to get Mimic Vat.
That's true. Obviously, like, in specific situations, it's going to change. But I think in a vacuum, I think I'd rather you have Mimic Vat. I don't know. It's tough.
I mean, it's the question, because Birthing Pod gives me multiple new effects of my choosing. Mm-hmm. Mimic Vat gives me the same effect over and over and over. I don't know what's worse.
And Birthing Pod does nothing if you have no creatures, but Mimic Vat is great if you have no creatures.
Yeah, I don't know. There's
like after a Wrath, you want Mimic Vat. Before one, you want Birthing Pod.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, you have to make that tough decision if you're playing against this deck. But you know what? If you can't beat them, join them. Make this deck yourself. Go ahead and do that. And then you want to deal with these tough decisions, and you'll be the one laughing as someone decides whether or not to kill your Mimic Vat or your Birthing Pod.
Oh man, what a fun romp this was.
Yeah, very fun romp. Thanks everyone for listening to this fun romp of a deck. Love some graveyard shenanigans, I'll tell you.
Yeah, make sure you let us know, of your favorite Wrath-proof cards, or your favorite things to do post-Wrath in the comments.
Yep, and otherwise, we'll see you guys next week with some more vlogs and deck techs and all that kind of stuff. Bye, everyone.
Big thanks to all our patrons who make these episodes possible.
Yeah, and if you want to check out more comedy videos, check out our Brews News playlist.
Make sure you follow us on Twitch TV to see when we play live.
If you want to chat with us, head over to Twitter. We're @CommandersBrew.
And please hit subscribe to ding the bell and find out when we got new stuff coming out.
See you next time.
Bye.